Hello, my name is Dr. Kay, and in this presentation we will talk about using tables and figures in research studies. Let's start with our objectives. First, we will explore the use of tables and figures in research studies. We will also cover the key APA guidelines for formatting tables and figures. We will also go over formatting guidelines, including tips on how to design tables and figures that are easy to read, visually appealing, and align with APA standards. Finally, we will discuss best practices for integrating tables and figures into your research study. We will open this presentation with a few general guidelines for using tables and figures in research writing. Let's talk about why tables and figures are important to include in your research studies. First, they enhance data clarity and accessibility. Complex data presented visually is much easier to understand than a long block of text. Tables and figures break down the information in a clear and concise way, making it more accessible to your audience. Second, they provide visual evidence to support your findings. Including well-designed tables and figures allows you to show your data in a format that reinforces your key points and arguments. Third, they help readers quickly understand complex information. Instead of reading through paragraphs of detailed explanations, readers can quickly capture the main ideas. Lastly, tables and figures improve the overall readability and engagement with your study. Well-placed visuals make your document easier to navigate and keep readers engaged as they move through your study. So when to use tables and when to use figures in your study? Each serves a unique purpose, and knowing which to use can improve the clarity and effectiveness of your study. Use tables when you want to present comprehensive information in a concise manner. Tables are also effective for presenting quantitative numerical data and for comparing values across different categories. They're also critical for displaying statistical results, such as statistical outputs or summaries. On the other hand, use figures to illustrate trends, patterns, or relationships in your data. Figures such as graphs and charts help readers quickly understand patterns or key takeaways of your study. They're also useful for conceptual models where a visual representation can help explain complex relationships better than text alone. Let's break down how to decide whether to use text, tables, or figures. Use text when you are reporting only a few data points or when trends can be described succinctly. For example, if you want to quickly mention a key result without requiring detailed comparisons, a brief sentence in the text will do the job. Use a table when you have a large volume of detailed data that requires comparison. Tables are ideal for displaying values across multiple categories and allowing readers to easily compare specific data points. Use figures when your goal is to highlight patterns, trends, or relationships in the data. Graphs, charts, and conceptual models help readers quickly understand themes or complex interactions. Whichever method you choose, always make sure that the reader will easily understand the information presented and avoid repeating the same data in multiple formats. Over the next few slides, we will talk about APA guidelines for presenting tables and figures in research studies. When including tables and figures in your study, proper numbering and titles are very important. All tables and figures should be numbered sequentially in the order they appear in your document. For example, your first table should be labeled as Table 1, the second is Table 2, and so on. The same rule applies to figures, Figure 1, Figure 2, and so forth. Each table or figure should also have a concise and descriptive title. The title should clearly convey the content without being overly long. Here you can see the two examples of how to format the table title and how to provide a simple, clear title that can help readers quickly understand what the table or figure represents. When using visuals, we need to properly introduce all tables and figures in our study. First, always introduce or call out a table or figure in the text before it appears in your document. This helps guide your readers. Second, always present the table or figure immediately after the paragraph where it was introduced. This is necessary as your readers will expect to see the table and it will make it easier for them to follow the flow of your study. Next, provide context for each table or figure by briefly describing what it shows and explaining its relevance to your research. For instance, if a table shows survey results, you might describe the key data points and explain how they support your findings. Lastly, when referring to tables and figures, use their specific numbers, such as Table 3 or Figure 2, rather than vague language like the table below or the figure above. This creates a more professional and precise presentation. When using tables and figures in your study, it is important to avoid duplication. The primary purpose of tables and figures is to supplement your text, not to repeat it. Use text to summarize or highlight key insights from the table or figure rather than repeating exact data. For example, instead of listing every number from a table in the text, you might say, as shown in Table 2, there is a significant positive correlation between X and Y. Tables and figures are most effective when used for efficiency and presenting a large volume of data in a clear and organized way. Meanwhile, your text and narrative should provide context and interpretation, helping readers understand what the data means and why it is relevant. On this slide, you can see a sample table in APA format illustrating the participants' job satisfaction levels. The first paragraph illustrates an example of text you want to avoid. In the first paragraph, you can see that the data from the table is repeated without adding any interpretation or context, which is not helpful to the reader and creates redundancy. On the other hand, the second paragraph briefly summarizes and interprets the data from the table. This version highlights the key findings and provides context without repeating the exact data from the table. Now, let's go over a few rules for formatting tables and figures. There are several rules for formatting tables and figures in APA style. First, when creating tables, always use the Insert Table function in Word. Avoid inserting tables and images, as this will make it hard to edit them and may reduce clarity. Second, pay attention to lines. APA style does not allow vertical lines in tables. Use horizontal lines sparingly. Use lines only for the top and bottom borders, and if necessary, to separate a header row from the data. Next, include notes when needed. If a table requires clarification, provide a general note below the table. Start with the word note in italics, followed by a brief explanation. This is helpful when your table includes symbols, abbreviations, or any data that might need further context. As for the font, use the same font as the rest of your document, Times New Roman. The font size can range between 10 and 12 points depending on the size and detail of your table. While spacing can range from single to double, single spacing often enhances readability, especially for larger tables. Finally, ensure consistency in formatting across all your tables. Whatever format you decide to use, make sure to use it consistently for all tables in the document. Here's a sample table formatted according to APA guidelines. We can observe some key elements here. First, the table is labeled as Table 1, and it has a concise descriptive title placed above the table. This title clearly conveys the content of the table without being overly detailed. As per APA style, no vertical lines are used. Additionally, the font used is consistent, in this case Times New Roman 12. You can also notice that the spacing is single, which enhances readability. Now, let's take a look at how to properly format figures according to APA guidelines. If you are creating a new figure, it is best to use the insert function in Word whenever possible. This ensures that your figures are embedded properly and can be edited. Include legend if your figure contains multiple variables that need explanation. A well-placed legend helps readers understand what each part of the figure represents without confusion. If you are presenting a graph, make sure to clearly label the axes and units. The x-axis and y-axis should be labeled with the variables they represent, along with any relevant units of measurement. Finally, if you are using an existing image, pay attention to the image quality. Ensure that your figures are clear, easy to read, and high resolution. Here is a sample figure formatted according to APA guidelines. This figure is labeled and has a descriptive title placed below the figure number as required by APA style. There are a few key features to note. First, a legend is included to differentiate between the North region and the South region. This is essential when a figure contains multiple variables, and it helps readers quickly understand what each part of the figure represents. Second, the X's are clearly labeled, which ensures the readers can interpret the data accurately. Third, the figure is clear and high resolution, which makes it easy to read and visually appealing. In the final few slides, we will go over best practices for using tables and figures in research writing. If you're using any adapted or reproduced tables or figures, you need to cite them following APA guidelines. If you reproduce a table or figure exactly as it appears in another source, you must do two things. First, provide a full citation in the figure or table note to ensure readers know where the original content comes from. Second, include the source in your reference list at the end of your document. If you adapt a table or figure, meaning you change the format, reorganize the data, or modify the content, you also need to include in the note that the table or figure has been adapted. In doing so, provide a full citation in the figure or table note and include the source in your reference list. Additionally, it is important to check whether the content is in the public domain. Public domain content is not protected by copyright and can be freely used without permission. However, if the content is not in the public domain, you will need to request permission from the author or publisher before using it. Now let's go over some common mistakes to avoid when working with tables and figures. The first mistake is using inconsistent or unclear labeling and formatting. Always ensure that your tables and figures are numbered sequentially, have clear titles, and follow consistent formatting throughout the document. Another common issue is failing to refer to tables and figures in the narrative. Remember, every table and figure should be introduced and discussed in the text before it appears. Next, avoid placing tables and figures earlier or later than introduced. Tables and figures should appear immediately after the paragraph where they are first mentioned, which helps maintain a logical flow for the reader. Another frequent mistake is poor image resolution or unclear visual design. Figures should be high resolution, easy to read, and well designed to enhance clarity. Lastly, omitting necessary explanatory notes can lead to confusion. If a table or figure contains abbreviations, symbols, or data that require further context, be sure to include a note below it to clarify. To conclude, here are some final tips for using tables and figures effectively in your research study. Remember that tables and figures should enhance data clarity and accessibility. Use them to present complex data in a way that is easier for readers to understand, rather than simply duplicating information from the text. Carefully select the data that will benefit most from visual presentation. Not all data needs to be in a table or figure, so focus on identifying the most complex or detailed data to present visually. Always follow APA guidelines for formatting your tables and figures, and be mindful of the common mistakes we discussed. Integrate visuals effectively into your narrative. Introduce each table and figure in the text, explain its relevance, and provide an interpretation of key data points. Lastly, use clear, consistent, and high-quality designs. These are best achieved by making your own tables and figures in a Word document. As we conclude, always remember that consistency in style and formatting across all tables and figures will give your study a polished, professional look and improve readability. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it helps you present your data more clearly and efficiently.